The music stopped the moment the glass shattered. Red wine streamed down his tailored suit, glistening under the ballroom lights as the billionaire's wife smirked, believing she had just humiliated a man who didn't belong among her kind. Cameras flashed, whispers spread, and in that instant, she had no idea her laughter would soon turn to begging. Because the man she tried to shame wasn't just another guest, he was the one person powerful enough to end her empire with a single decision. Before the night was over, her arrogance would cost her everything, and the world would watch it all unfold in real time. But first, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and comment below from which city you are watching this video. The ballroom glittered beneath the glow of 1,000 chandeliers, where the city's elite gathered for the Western Foundation Gala, a night soaked in luxury, ego, and power. Laughter echoed between marble pillars as champagne flowed freely, and the air was thick with perfume and pretense. Every conversation revolved around wealth, connections, and who was watching whom. At the edge of the crowd stood Marcus Reed, calm, composed, and deliberately unnoticed. He wasn't there to flaunt his success. He'd been invited as a keynote donor, recognized quietly for funding education programs that changed thousands of lives. Most guests didn't realize that Marcus was also the chairman of Reed Global Industries, one of the top 5 defense innovators in the country. His name commanded respect in government circles, but here, among the shallow glitter of old money, he was just another face they didn't recognize. Across the room, Evelyn Hale, the billionaire host's wife, noticed him. To her, appearances define worth, and Marcus didn't fit her idea of belonging. Her gaze lingered with quiet disdain before she decided to act. She approached him, her smile dripping with superiority, assuming he must be part of the staff. Her tone carried the kind of arrogance that only comes from a lifetime of unchecked privilege. When Marcus calmly replied that he was an invited guest, laughter rippled through the nearby crowd. Evelyn mocked him in front of everyone, her words slicing through the music, feeding her need to dominate the moment. The room felt tense, the air electric. Marcus didn't retaliate. His silence was sharp, unsettling. And that silence, that quiet, unflinching composure, would soon become the spark that set her entire empire on fire. The tension thickened, heavy and suffocating, as Evelyn's laughter rang out through the ballroom. Guests shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to intervene or pretend nothing was happening. Cameras, once focused on the dazzling decor, began tilting discreetly toward the confrontation, capturing every second of what would soon become the most replayed moment of the year. Evelyn's smirk widened. "Some people just don't know when they're out of their depth," she muttered loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. Marcus's calm gaze met hers, steady and unflinching. Without raising his voice, without an ounce of visible anger, he said something that cut deeper than any insult, though the words themselves were simple. His composure irritated her more than defiance ever could. Then, in a move born of arrogance, Evelyn reached for a glass of red wine from a nearest table. "You must be thirsty," she said mockingly, and before anyone could stop her, she poured the contents across Marcus's chest. The sound of liquid hitting fabric echoed through the hall like a slap. Gasps erupted. The once lively orchestra faltered, the music fading into stunned silence. Crimson wine soaked through Marcus's suit, dripping onto the polished marble floor. Evelyn tilted her chin proudly. "There," she sneered. "Now you look more appropriate for your level." But Marcus didn't flinch. He simply picked up a napkin, wiped his hand, and looked at her with an expression of chilling calm. "You just made the most expensive mistake of your life," he said quietly. Then he turned and walked out, leaving behind a room full of silent witnesses, and a woman who believed she had won. Minutes later, the whispers began. Phones lit up across the ballroom as guests uploaded photos and videos. Within hours, hashtags spread like wildfire, #WineAndRuin. By morning, the footage had gone viral, viewed tens of millions of times. The internet tore through Evelyn's arrogance with righteous fury, calling out her racism, her entitlement, and the humiliating spectacle she had created. When Charles Hale, her husband, woke to the chaos, the damage was already irreversible. His phone buzzed with notifications, calls from board members, messages from investors, and endless media alerts. Headlines screamed, "Billionaire's wife pours wine on black CEO, public outrage erupts." Charles confronted Evelyn, disbelief turning to rage. "Do you realize what you've done?" he demanded. But Evelyn brushed it off, insisting it was being blown out of proportion, until Charles's assistant burst in with the news that shattered what remained of their composure. The Pentagon meeting has been canceled, the assistant said. Reed Global has blacklisted Hale Aerospace indefinitely. Evelyn froze, her confidence draining from her face. Charles could barely speak. Their billion-dollar defense deal, months in the making, was gone in an instant. Meanwhile, across the country, Marcus sat quietly in a Washington conference room. "Proceed with the decision," he said to the Deputy Secretary of Defense. "Hale Aerospace no longer meets ethical standards." His tone remained calm, his posture dignified. There was no revenge in his eyes, only principle. The next day, the markets reacted violently. Hale Aerospace's stock plummeted. Sponsors withdrew. Charles was forced to resign from his own board. Evelyn's name became synonymous with disgrace. Her face was splashed across every news outlet, every social media feed, the image of a woman brought down by her own arrogance. And Marcus? He said nothing. His silence, once mocked, had become the loudest justice of all. The fall was swift, public, and merciless. Within 48 hours, the Hale family's pristine empire was collapsing under the weight of its own scandal. Every network replayed the video, dissecting every frame of Evelyn's smirk, every second of Marcus's silence. Protesters gathered outside the Hale corporate tower, holding signs that read, "Dignity speaks louder," and "Respect is not optional." Charles Hale watched his life's work unravel on live television. Stockholders demanded his resignation. Contracts dissolved overnight. What had taken decades to build was destroyed in less than a week. Not by competitors, not by bad investments, but by one moment of unchecked arrogance. Evelyn's name became poison in elite circles. Sponsors canceled appearances. Charities rejected her donations. Once celebrated as a symbol of high society, she now found herself hiding behind closed curtains, chased by cameras and public fury. But Marcus Reed didn't celebrate. When reporters tried to contact him for interviews, he declined. When offered speaking engagements about his victory, he turned them down. For him, this was never about revenge, it was about exposure. The world needed to see how power, without humility, devours itself. Then came the interview that changed everything. Weeks after the scandal, Marcus finally appeared on national television. The host asked him, "After everything that happened that night, the humiliation, the insult, what made you stay silent?" Marcus's faint smile carried the weight of composure that had silenced a ballroom. "Because noise doesn't create change," he said. "Dignity does." That one line reverberated across the world. It trended on every platform, shared by millions as a symbol of grace under fire. Students quoted it. CEOs repeated it in meetings. Even Evelyn couldn't escape it. The words of the man she tried to degrade had become the moral anthem of her own downfall. In the weeks that followed, Hale Aerospace was dismantled piece by piece. Lawsuits mounted. Assets froze. And through it all, Marcus's name remained untarnished, his silence transformed into a message louder than any public statement could ever deliver. That night at the gala had ended her arrogance, but had also awakened something far greater in everyone who watched it unfold. Months later, the echoes of that fateful night still lingered through the corridors of power and privilege. The Hale estate, once a symbol of extravagance, now sat quietly on the market, stripped of prestige, reputation, and legacy. Evelyn and Charles sold their mansion to pay off lawsuits and mounting debts. The empire she once flaunted had vanished, leaving behind only lessons carved in humiliation. For Evelyn, life became a cycle of penance. Court-ordered community service brought her to a local shelter, where she volunteered daily, serving meals to people she once would have ignored. Cameras followed her at first, eager to document her fall from grace, but over time, the world moved on. She worked quietly now, no makeup, no audience, no arrogance. Just a woman trying to face the mirror again. One evening, as she ladled soup into a bowl, she froze. Across the room stood Marcus Reed, composed as ever, visiting the shelter on behalf of his company's charity initiative. Their eyes met for the first time since that night. The air grew still, thick with the weight of unfinished remorse. Marcus approached, his expression unreadable but calm. "How are you finding your new role?" he asked gently. Evelyn swallowed, her voice trembling. "I'm learning what service really means." He nodded. "Good. Keep learning." Then, after a long pause, she whispered, "I'm sorry." Marcus's reply was simple, deliberate. "You should be. But don't waste the lesson." He turned to leave, then stopped at the doorway. Without looking back, he said, "You were right that night. I didn't belong there." He glanced over his shoulder. I belong above it. In the months that followed, Marcus established the Hale Foundation for Human Integrity, funded entirely by the assets forfeited from the company that once disrespected him. Its mission: to train leaders in ethics, empathy, and racial awareness across corporate America. At its opening ceremony, Marcus addressed a room filled with CEOs, lawmakers, and young professionals. His words echoed through the hall. Power without character is a weapon. Wealth without empathy is noise. But dignity outlasts everything. As the crowd rose in applause, one truth remained clear. Arrogance can crumble empires, but dignity rebuilds humanity.